Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And we're here today to talk about all the chocolate news that's fit to eat. Before we jump into today's topic, what I want to do is welcome everyone again for joining me here today and to say that, please go into the live chat in the comment section, wherever you might be watching today, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Give me a quick shout out. Let me know where you're connecting from, and I'll give you a quick shout out during the live stream. Of course, at any time during the hour, if you have a question that you'd like to ask me, also throw it into the comments, and I will get the question up on screen, and we'll try to ask and answer it during the course of the hour. So as I start off, most times, what I want to do is I want to point out here, hey, we're looking at the homepage of TheChocolateLife.com right now, and it's live. You can go there and you can see all of the stories that are live. I want to point out that for every single one of the live streams, I do create a post. And so here's the post for today's live stream. And what you'll do is you'll find out more about what it is that I'm doing, why it is that I'm trying to achieve, whatever it is that I'm trying to achieve during the course of the hour. And if there are any resources, I link to those resources, right? And if there are any other things that are mentioned during the course of the hour, I will put links to them on this page so you can follow up. If you're not watching this live, you'll come to it later. You should also know that for every single live stream, I put it on an archive. And so you can go to the archive. You can see future scheduled live streams, as well as all of the past live streams that I've put together. So you can go there. These links here will take you to the post on the Chocolate Life. And if you scroll down, what you'll do is you'll find all the links to watch, whether on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. So just a quick bit of housekeeping there. And before we go any further, I want to say hello to Mark and to Yuri, who are connecting from Blue Spruce in Denver, or in Denver, Boulder, in Colorado, wherever it is. Thanks for joining us again today. Now, why I wanted to talk about this particular topic is that I wanted to go through and help you understand how I look at the chocolate news, right? And how I go decide whether or not it's something I want to cover. And if I've got a story which is very deep and very, very technical, how is it that I go and approach reading the article and following things so that what I can do is I can understand whether or not the data that are being presented are data that is reliable, or what is it that there might be in terms of an editorial focus that I need to be aware of. And my goal here is to share some of my techniques with you, and so that what you can do is you can become more educated consumers of chocolate news specifically, and perhaps regular news in general. And so I wanted to start off with what I think is probably the most consequential news story in chocolate in the last couple of months, and that is this one. So lead and cadmium could be in your dark chocolate. So this is a very, very, this has generated just a huge tempest of social media. It went viral. It's been picked up in the New York Times. It's been picked up by a whole bunch of leading media outlets, as well as been embraced by sort of fringe conspiracy theorists in the health and wellness, complementary and alternative medicine space. And we need to be careful about understanding exactly what is and what is not being said in this article. And so let's go through and see what it is that this article has to say and how I would approach reading it. So very, very quickly, the headline: Consumer Reports says that they found dangerous heavy metals in chocolate for a bunch of brands. And here are the ones that had the most and some that are safer. Not actually suggesting that any of them is safe, interestingly enough, but here are some that are safer. So we've got the words dangerous and we've got the words safer. And we have to wonder, number one, why they chose these words in it, and why they chose Hershey's, Theo, and Trader Joe's as opposed to many other brands that they could have chosen. So off the top of my head, I'm wondering, okay, what is it that Consumer Reports is trying to say? Scrolling through, so we one place to look is, okay, where are the links that they're pointing to? So if we look at this link, it's a link on the Consumer Reports website. It's about how to work dark chocolate into your diet. And so they talk about what some of the benefits of chocolate are, reducing inflammation, working in heart disease. It gives you some things to do, so healthier ways to eat chocolate, but they also recommend some brands. All right. So interestingly, we have Ghirardelli's here, Hue here, Trader Joe's 72%, Alter Eco here, Beyond Good, Choco Love. And so they have a bunch of preferred brands in terms of finding tastier dark chocolates to incorporate into your diet. So we'll come back to these brands, but it's important to know what they were. So I'm going to leave this here and go back to this article. So they suggest here there is a dark side to chocolate, but very interestingly, and this is the point that I'll make, there is no sort of retrospection, and fortunately there's no attempt for what we would call retcon or retroactive continuity to somehow connect the recommendations that they make on this article with what they're going to talk about in this article. So number one, first lock, read more about how they tested the chocolate. Now, so this is really, really important. So there's a PDF we can go look at. I am going to put the link to this PDF into the article or into today's post. I'm not going to download the PDF so that you can do that, for a bunch of reasons. I don't expect you to be able to read what it is that I'm here, but this is really it's an interesting document, and it's worth paying attention to. First one of which is they do say that their labs are ISO 17025 accredited. And so what that means, so this is here, ISO 17025 accredited, which means that there is a set of criteria that the labs need to meet in order to be able to achieve this certification. And if you're going to have your products tested, what you should do is you should make sure that your lab is in fact certified, because there are some standards that go to sampling methodologies and how equipment is used and all these kinds of things. You want to make sure that happens. So this is something that I think is really good. The other things that they talk about here are really, really important, because part of it is that it talks to the statistical confidence that we can have in what it is that they're doing. So number one, they said they tested two 3 samples. We don't know which one are 2 and which ones are 3. And they had at least 2 distinct lot codes. That's really, really good. So 2 different lot codes. So if I have 2 different lot codes and 2 different samples, it means that I'm not running tests on the same chocolate, right? It could be. So that's a good thing. They're selected based on online store surveys, which they don't explain what that means. And they purchased the majority of the samples in April and May of 2022 online and from stores in the New York City area. Right, so one of the things that I know here, and this is actually something that was brought up to me, is that we need to understand the confidence interval, not only the statistical confidence that we can have in any specific result set which is given to us, but also what the ranges are. So in this case, if we wanted, for example, to have a 95% confidence in our results, chances are for a brand like Hershey, we'd probably, somebody told me they need to have over 1,000 samples in order to be able to get to this 95% confidence interval. We also don't know the error bar. So we don't know if one tested very, very high, right, and that brought the other one up, or one tested low and that brought the other one down, or both of them tested about the same way. So in any real statistical analysis, what we'd get is we'd get not just an average or mean or median. They would have to tell you what it was, but we'd have to have the min and the max and what the error bars are in terms of our confidence, and in terms of the reliability, the statistical confidence we can have that these things are representative of the entire population of all the chocolate that these companies make. And so this, for me, right, is something that brings the entire numbers that are reported into question. But it's really important that they tell you these are the tests that we use. So here's the test that they use. For some reason, they've got a special test for arsenic that they mentioned twice. But here's how they do the analysis for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury using mass spec. So they're letting you know the specific tests. So if you want to go, for example, and look at what these tests are and what the error bars are in the tests, how reliable they are, and things like that, you can go and do this independent testing, this independent research, right? The question I have, however, and more importantly, what they do is they tell you what the risk assessment is. So how are they going and calculating the risk assessment over here? And so they're talking about some combination of FDA data and data from other places, from the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, and other kinds of things. And they'll let you know how they are determining the risk. However, one of the things which is missing here is that they're not talking about, they do not mention on this page or on the next page, right, the California limit, right, and why they chose the California limit, MADL, as the specific reason, as the specific level for what they're doing. So we have to determine what the actual baseline that they were using in terms of exposure. So what this does is, it answers some of our questions, but it raises some of the questions as well. Really, really important to understand that. So we go back to the article, and it says that lead and cadmium can be found in many other foods, right? But the challenge is that this particular article just focuses on baby food, right? And it focuses on the relative risk of baby food, whether you make it yourself or whether you buy it in the store. And so there is, at least at this point in the article, they don't actually talk about what the overall risk of chocolate compared with other foods are, right? And the link that they point to points specifically to babies. Why? Why babies? Why chocolate? We have emotional connections with babies. We have emotional connections with chocolate that we don't have with spinach, or that we don't have with other foods. We don't think about the wheat berries that we grind into flour. We don't have this emotional connection with them, but we do have an emotional connection with babies, and we do with chocolate. And I believe that it makes sense that the focus on baby food and chocolate is one which tugs at our heartstrings, and that's one of the reasons why they're chosen. So we go down here and they talk about the test results, and here what they do is they talk about the California maximum allowable dose level. So they talk about that, but interestingly enough, again, it's not talked about here, right? So as part of their risk assessment. So I need as a consumer of news, not only do I need to read the article, but I need to read all of the footnotes and all the references. And my guess is that 99% of all the people who read this article did not follow a single link in the article. That would be my guess, right? So we do find that, and we find out that what happens is that Consumer Reports scientists believe that California levels are the most protective available. So they are, in fact, the lowest of the ones between the United States. Federal guidelines, there is no law regarding these in the United States. There are just interim reference levels. There are guidelines here in the United States and what the EU has. But California's are the most drastic. in the sense that they are the lowest. So they're saying they're most protective. So we look at the safer choices, and here is where we run into some interesting questions. Number one is, in my experience, and please tell me if you've had the same experience in your interactions with some people who are talking about this, people misunderstand what these numbers mean, right? So in many cases, what they'll do is, I have found, is they'll take a number like 139%, and what they will do is they will do it as, it's not 139% of the maximum allowable dose, right? It's some other number that they've said, ooh, here's a number and it's big and it's scary, right? And this is a problem because we don't actually know from here what these numbers are. So this is 14% of what, right? This is 40% of what, right? At this point, we don't know, right? We have to look very closely. How many people look very closely is that the maximum allowance dose level, 0.5 microgram, and cadmium 4.1 micrograms. So we need to read very closely. How many people skipped over it, right? And ran directly to this number. They saw the word safer and they go, okay, that's what I care about. I have to guess that the people at Consumer Reports know how people read on the internet. And for something like this, most people are going to be skimming, right? You have to be very, very serious in terms of the approach to reading this to understand what it is that's going on. So we go here, we look at this above and below. We have things that are high in cadmium. We have things that are high in lead. We have high in both lead and cadmium. And what I want to do is I want to go back to the other article here and to say how to work these products, chocolate, into your diet. And go take a look yourself. I don't want to belabor the point here, but how many of these bars that are on this list, right, recommended ways to incorporate chocolate in your diet, dark chocolate in your diet, are on this list as well. And you'll find there's an interesting overlap there in terms of brand recommendation. And what I don't see is, I don't see how Consumer Reports can consistently take these two different points in their reporting. Number one is that here's the way to incorporate dark chocolate in your diet. And what we're doing is we're recommending brands and products which are known to be high in heavy metals. My guess is nobody thought to go through and look at the history of it, although I can't understand why, because there's a direct link, right? There's a direct link to, how to incorporate chocolate in your diet. And so they didn't think about it, which is troubling to me in terms of how they're doing it. It's troubling to me in terms of the due diligence that they did on their own previous reporting on the same topic, right? That there appears to be, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths here. And someone could find the Consumer Reports article on how to incorporate dark chocolate into your diet without ever seeing the heavy metals article and not know that Consumer Reports is making two diametrically opposed recommendations, right? And so what I would like Consumer Reports to do is to actually go through, take a look at this article and update this article, right? To say, oops, we've changed our minds, right? Or to add cadmium and other kinds of levels on these bars, cadmium, lead, arsenic, those kinds of levels on the bars, so that people will know what the risk factors are for these particular bars. So this is not something that I think that the reporters at Consumer Reports, the editorial board at Consumer Reports, is expecting the average reader to do. And I think that one of the things that we know about this, about the way people read on the internet, is that they will remember the first headline, but they won't remember when there's a retraction. They won't remember when somebody comes back and says, hey, we've changed our mind about it. The original reporting was wrong, or it was incorrect, or incomplete, or something like that. And so we scroll down here. They talk about some good things, flavonols. They're talking about some other things, but they also talk about how one might get the lead and cadmium out of cocoa and chocolate. And what that does is it takes us to, right, an organization called As You Sow, right? And this is the link that's pointed to. And what we do is we find out that there's an expert investigation that As You Sow has undertaken. So As You Sow is a California nonprofit. It basically, well, from my perspective, it appears to exist to provide the foundation for people to sue companies that do not meet specific regulations in California's Proposition 65, that they provide some research, and then what happens is that people use this research and they go out and they file lawsuits against people. That may or may not be true, but I think that that's part of their business model. Whether it's their intent or not, I think it's a part of their business model. So we come here, all right, and they're talking about Proposition 65, and they worked with over 20 companies. They list these companies. And it's interesting here for me, again, because we know that Hershey's as a company, right, is different from Trader Joe's as a company. So Trader Joe's doesn't manufacture any of its own products, right? It's a retail environment. So if Trader Joe's is branding something, they're not manufacturing it. This is not something most people know about cocoa and chocolate. I mean, it's interesting enough. Hershey's doesn't actually manufacture any of its own chocolate. So it sources from Barry Callebaut and Cargill primarily. So this is not something anybody would know. Kroger and Whole Foods are in the same category as Trader Joe's. Godiva doesn't manufacture its own chocolate. Theo manufactures much of its chocolate. I don't know if they manufacture 100% of it. Equal Exchange. I mean, so there's this mismatch of, right, different kinds of companies here. And there's no attempt to differentiate these companies. There's also no attempt to connect ownership. So, for example, Lindt owns Ghirardelli and has since 1998. Chocolove uses Barry Callebaut almost exclusively as a supplier. The same thing is true of Hershey's. See's Candy uses Guittard as a source, right? So we don't understand anything about these companies. And it turns out you need to be pretty much a subject matter expert in order to be able to figure out what these relationships are. And it turns out that they matter, right? Because in law, what's going to happen is that if Hershey's is being sued, right, they're the one who manufactured the finished product and offered it up for sale, which might be available in Kroger's, for example, right, or CVS or someplace like that. But they didn't manufacture the chocolate. So what they're probably going to do, because they're a defendant in one of these lawsuits resulting from the Consumer Reports article, is that they're going to implead Barry Callebaut and Cargill, because Barry Callebaut and Cargill are the ones who supplied the chocolate that they use. And Hershey's is going to say, listen, we relied on their test results in terms of our product manufacturing decisions. So when we say that Hershey's failed to warn consumers, I mean, it's a really interesting question about where liability lies. And that's, again, less about the news per se, but it talks to the problem of trying to go back and deconstruct. I mean, if it weren't for the fact that I've been doing this for 20 plus years, I know these companies, I know some of their sourcing relationships, I've got the history of looking at things, it would be very, very difficult for the average consumer to understand what it is that's going on. We then go to, so you can download this 381 page report. However, if you want to download the 381 page report, you have to give the As You Sow people your number, your contact information. I've downloaded it. And one of the things that I looked for in all of the 381 pages. There are several reports that are concatenated together. It's very academic. These guys have done a really good job. The bibliographies, I think, are longer than actually the report itself. But what we do is we find that when they do the testing and just scroll through and look to see if there are any plots, right, with error bars on them. So, we talked about the number of samples, right? But, where is the actual test data that's being reported here? And let's make this a little bigger. Where is the actual test data that's being reported here? And I'm looking through here and I'm, this is an interesting one. They're talking about the country of origin, right? They're talking about the lead concentration in the shell and the lead concentration in the nib in terms of parts per billion. Really interesting question about this, which I mentioned earlier, is that we've got micrograms per serving, micrograms per day, and then we have parts per million and parts per billion, right? And we need to be able to figure out how to be able to go and compare, right? How does 834 parts per billion in the shell, what does that mean in terms of potential exposure when we do it in terms of micrograms per day in terms of a 1 ounce serving, a 28 to 30 gram serving? So these are interesting, perhaps, right? But what can we tell from them? There's not a whole lot we can tell from them, right? Because we do talk about, they do talk about what are some of the sources for this, which turned out to be aviation gas from piston engine airplanes. That is the source for most environmental contamination in post-harvest processing. Crop dusters, small planes, that is the only place where lead is being used in gasoline these days. But we come through here, I'm only at 75 pages in here, and I'm through 2 reports. I'm in a 3rd report. So we do talk about here, whole bean cadmium sampling data country by origin. All right, here's where we get the data that are presented, and we've got standard deviations, the number of samples. This is very cool. I mean, we've got finally some data about where things stand, and what we need to know is, what does this actually mean? For me, right, I'm looking at this, and what I really want to do is I want to take this data and put it into a visual form, a graph that is going to be able to make it possible for me to be able to compare in interesting ways what it is that's going on. So this is, let's pick a way to display the data, and then let's go pick a way to be able to make it as difficult as possible in order for somebody who is not a statistician, for somebody who doesn't have any experience in any of the underlying mathematics involved, all right, in order to be able to do it. So this is cool. I mean, but we're 120 pages into the chart. We've got, finally, in the 3rd graph, we've got some ideas about where things are. So we have what are called the interquartile ranges, if you know what they are. These are really, really important to know. And what they can do is they can tell us some things. But now what we need to do is we need to understand, if these are all in the part per billion range, right? How do I, the average person, go about converting parts per billion in terms of micrograms per serving or micrograms per day? There's a lot of work that needs to get done in order to be able to figure out what this data actually means, right? But the data are here, right? And I need to go and understand what this all means and how I can use it right? But I'm 127 pages in. I've had to go through dozens of pages of charts in order to be able to get to this point. And so what I want to suggest is, this is one of the challenges that we face as reporters, is that if we're going to actually talk about this, we need to know a huge amount about statistics and the mathematics and all this kind of stuff in order to be able to go and take a look and understand what it is that's going on. But in the end, right, And this is one of the things that Keith Ayub wrote about in his most recent article was, what does this all mean in terms of the human body, right? So we are going to work on cadmium and lead. What does it mean in terms of uptake and risk, right? Because it is the dose that makes the poison. That is true. But there are a lot of individual factors that go into determining what the actual risk associated with a dose is. For example, if I'm 4 years old, right, and I weigh 15 kilos. Sorry, I don't remember ages and body weights anymore. My daughter is 25, and I don't remember. But it turns out that age and body weight, there are lots of other confounding factors as well as mitigating factors. So just to say that an absolute amount of exposure makes no sense, and then to realize that chocolate is number 8 or 9 or 10 on the list of things that people consume on a daily basis that we have to worry about when it comes to heavy metals exposure. So I just wanted to go through this just to let you know that this is some of the background research that I did, right, in terms of understanding this story, right, and trying to figure out how to go about reporting on it. And then, I go to As You Sow and I look at these reports, right? And I've got to, ask myself some really interesting questions. So I have 2 tests from March of 2022 for what appeared to be the same product, Cadbury Royal Dark Chocolate, right? But one of the samples is higher in lead than the other sample. And the question is why? Were these in fact tested by different labs? These are in fact 2 different samples from 2 different lot codes? There's a whole lot of data that are here, right, that is not actually cross-checked against this report. So we don't know how these tests reference in terms of these things. So we can't understand, right, exactly what it is that's going on. A real challenge. There's actually, I think I may have mentioned this before. We have the Hershey Company. So if I actually go and look at the Hershey Company listing, so everything at Hershey's, one of the things that's missing here on the Hershey list is Lilly is now owned by the Hershey Company. So if I didn't know that, I wouldn't know that they're related. I don't know if they fixed this, but there's a Lily's Sweets, right? There are 2 entries here. These appear to be before Lily's was purchased by Hershey, right? And then I go and I find Lily's, right? And these appear to be include, right? The 2 entries under Lily's Sweets, but then these 4 are after Lily's was purchased by Hershey. And what we do is we find out that there are some interesting differences between 2014 and 2016, and these other products. Now, are they the same beans? We don't know. Could it be that Lily's, before the Hershey's acquisition, was buying their cocoa, probably their liquor, or whatever product they're using from different sources? So we don't know where the differences come in. And this is one of the questions that I have about this that really, really, for me, calls into question how the results are presented and what it is that I can know from reading the results. I mean, there are lots of red flags, literally, for me about the way this is presented. There's also been an update. The last time I was here, these rather than in micrograms per serving, were this footer at the bottom was in parts per million or parts per billion, which is another thing. Why is it micrograms per serving per here and parts per million or parts per billion at the bottom? It made no sense whatsoever. I'm glad that they fixed it. I have no idea how long it was that way. I'd have to go to the Wayback Machine and figure that out. But really, really interesting to do. Notice that there are only 469 entries, but what we'll do is we'll find that if we go and look at the tables, we'll find that there are thousands of samples from some of these things. Again, we don't know why these 469 entries were covered. It's also, really interesting. We go take a look and we go look at just at Hershey Company, and we find that there are only 18 Hershey entries out of the 469. We go to another company. Let's try Trader Joe's down here, and we find that for some reason they've got a hard on for Trader Joe's, right? So 59 entries out of 469. So 60 out of 460. For some reason, they spent a lot of time with Trader Joe's. Question why? Why does As You Sow spend so much time looking at Trader Joe's? And I got you. See all that red there? That's one of the reasons, in my opinion, they're doing it, because they can say, ooh, Trader Joe's is a poster child of bad work, right? Right. You have to be very careful, in other words, about how you go and look at the data that are presented to you, and understand if what they're trying to do is there a story that they're telling here that they're not actually being 100% clear about. Right? So we're about halfway through. I've spent quite a bit of time on this one story, but I just wanted to let you know that this is the kind of research that I go through on a bunch of these stories. This has taken place over the course of nearly a year. And so I'm showing you a lot of stuff in a very compressed period of time. I didn't spend all this time from mid-December doing all of this research, but I've been thinking about this for quite some time. And Keith and I have been writing about these topics for quite some time. But I wanted to show you how you would need to go through if you were, an independent subject matter expert and you wanted to be able to deconstruct this stuff, what you need to look at, how you need to look at it, where you need to go, the sort of the kinds of ancillary experience that you need to have in order to be able to understand what these reports are telling you, and how you need to go and work with them. So having said that, and taking a quick reset, reminding everybody you're watching The Chocolate Life Live here on the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube, or on LinkedIn, or on Facebook. Wherever you are, please give a thumbs up if you can. Like the video wherever you are. If you have a question or a comment, please put it into the comments, and I will get it asked and answered. If you just want to give a shout out where you might be connecting in from today, please let me know, and I will do that as well. I want to do a quick say thanks to the guys from Encore Coffee Company in Kansas City, home of the Chiefs. That is absolutely right. So this is Mike. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you're having a good day, and looking forward to it. And yes, it is Happy Friday. Thank you very much with everyone. So that's a deep dive into one aspect of things. What I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about some of the other places that I go for information, right? So how do I find stories? How do I find topics that are of interest to me, and that might be of interest to you, my audience? Where do I go? And one of the places that I go is I have a Google alert signed on the words chocolate or cacao or cocoa. And so every day I end up getting an email that says, here's your Google alert. And I go find, and I just do a high level search through this and find out if there's anything interesting that might be, that could be interesting. So one of the things we find is that, yay, here is somebody who has done a report on the Consumer Reports, and this is National Public Radio. So one of the things that this suggests to me in going through the history is I want to find out how many other people are picking up this story. And so I will go take a look at that. The other one is, wow, do I care about Ed Sheeran, what he thinks about chocolate coming from New Zealand, specifically this brand, Whitaker's? The answer is no. But it's interesting that somebody thought this was news. I believe this is actually a New Zealand publication, so it makes sense that they would care what people think about the local cuisine. I got to tell you, there are some fabulous bean to bar chocolate makers down in New Zealand. There are some people who are doing some really wonderful work. Whitaker's is the local equivalent of a mass market brand, or Hershey's. I don't know that I would point them out as being the most interesting place to go, or the most interesting brand of chocolate to go look about with New Zealand. But it's and then you get just weird conflations. Skate shop owner reflects on Tyree Nichols, how much dark chocolate is safe to eat. I mean, I don't understand how those headlines get together. We have another, what looks like NPR outlet, which is picking up the dark chocolate story. Yahoo Sports is, for some reason, Yahoo Sports is picking up the dark chocolate story. And so one of the things that I can see here is trends in topics that people are interested in. And so this is something that I will look for. I mean, this is a fun story. If I'm looking for, right, a 9-year-old launches a charitable artisan chocolate business, I think it's cool. I wonder if she's using ruby chocolate there. It doesn't say here, does it? Let's go find out. It doesn't say which kind of chocolate she's using. It does look like it might be ruby, but it's a fun little story, and it's part of what it is that I go through on a semi-regular basis to see about what stories are trending, what I might like to go take a look at. Right. So if you don't have a Google alert set up for this, I would recommend. It's free. You can also set up Google alerts independently for you personally, your name personally. It turns out that there are a lot more people named Clay Gordon in the United States than I ever thought that there were. I grew up and I actually knew two, met two others, but there are a lot more these days than there used to be. Finding them all through this place, but you can also pick one up on the name of your company or the name of competitors or things like that. So this is a really good way to keep on top of things that are happening in a quick scroll. And I can, when I want to, go back and look at it on a day-by-day basis, just really, really quickly. But for example, I could search for heavy. And I've got 5 mentions of heavy, not necessarily all of them, right? Fender, Telecaster, so chocolate related to guitars, or the color of the guitar. So it's not 100%, but this can give me an idea about how often I might find something like heavy metals in the news. So really important tool that I use in terms of understanding what is sort of top of mind, what people are talking about, right? So if you're in the business and you want to know about things, heads up, I write for this magazine. I am their technical editor. And one of the things that I like about being the technical editor of this magazine is that they allow me to do my own research. I'm not just reporting press releases. I'm not just rewriting press releases. So I believe this is the same for other articles on it. But you can go in here and go take a look and see what's going on here. Just a quick just a quick view of headlines. You can figure things out. Oh, here's one of my articles: the future of regenerative cocoa farming. So this is based on my trip down to Ecuador in October, visiting the Hacienda Victoria. Another magazine that you might want to look at a regular basis. These are free to subscribe. Newsletter magazines, Confectionery News. So Confectionery News spends more of its time, I believe, on reporting press releases rather than doing independent article generation. This is an interesting article. 55% of cocoa experts from Cote d'Ivoire are untraceable. It turns out that Anthony Myers was in Venice with me when I was at the Barry Callebaut second generation chocolate launch. I've met him on a number of occasions in the past. I believe he was at the 2019 launch of Whole Fruit. I don't know that he was in Confectionery News at the time, but there are some interesting clues here, things that we probably should think about as assumptions or reporting that we need to look into more closely, because there are some really fascinating reports from this. One of which is that the data that is disclosed in transparency reports and traceability reports is incomplete, irregularly, non-standardized, and or never updated. Right? I've talked about transparency reports on a bunch of different occasions, traceability, transparency, fair reports, whatever it is that you want to call them. And it turns out that this is an issue that I've raised in the past. And here's an independent organization which is saying these are also issues. Another thing that in this article, again, 80 to 100% of exported cocoa from Cote d'Ivoire is not traceable to its first buyer, let alone to its origin farm. And so Big Chocolate, who's saying, 75, 80, 90% of our cocoa is traceable, we need to understand what that means. I have a problem with this, right? Which is these are not links, right? So they give me the primary author on a report. They give me the name of the report, right? There is a link to the report, the information, but I don't actually have the report itself, right? And so there's no real way for me to understand. It may be in a journal that's not open access. I may be able to get at the abstract. I may not be able to get at the article itself, but I can't figure out if this is reporting from the press release straight, or whether or not Mr. Myers had a chance to speak with anybody involved in putting together the report. So just a real quick note on that. But this is fabulous numbers. What I can do is I can say, when I talk to people, that this group, which is the Journal of Environmental Research Letters, right? I can say we have some basis to suggest that reporting on transparency and traceability out of Cote d'Ivoire is suspect. Okay, and so an interesting question to ask. And so now when I go to people who want to talk to me about traceability out of these areas, I can ask them about this question. And I can go talk to colleagues to see if they have access to the journal and whether or not I can actually get a copy of the original research. Speaking of which, let me open up a new tab and go to a place where, if you don't know this, you may want to set up an account if you're interested in any of this. And this is ResearchGate. When I signed up for this, you had to have an academic affiliation. So I'm a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design, so I use my RISD affiliation to be able to sign up for this. But this is a really fabulous place to go find out if research reports are available to you. If there are sometimes things that are in non-open access journals, what you'll do is you'll find that they're available here. This one, right, this Mayo Principe, La Civilisation, I met the author of this report, Francisco Valdez, when I was in Ecuador in 2010. And so I've had a chance to speak with Francisco in person and sit through a presentation that he did. But this is a fabulous place to go find research reports. And I use this, right, as a place to go find academic, scientific research, peer-reviewed research, which backs up a lot of what it is that I do, what it is that I write about. Another news site, so in addition to International Confectionery News, there's another one called Kennedy's Confections. And you can go here. It turns out that, in my opinion, most of what it is that gets reported here is press releases. That the people who are doing the writing behind this aren't doing a whole lot of independent research, and they're not doing a whole lot of independent evaluation. But what's interesting here, right, and this is one of the reasons why I go through it, is we can talk about what the confectionery industry, and this is one of the top 3 to 5 publications in the industry, what they think is innovative. So we have sugar-free organic gummies. We need to go through and find out what the actual innovation is here, because it doesn't say. We can learn about acquisitions, right? Really, really important. This is interesting. Hershey's creating a pairing guide. I'd like to know more about that. So this is a great, again, here might be something. Research reveals Christmas shopping habits. It turns out nothing interesting. It's just, people are going and doing their Christmas shopping at convenience stores for candy. So not hugely interesting, but this is one of the places where I get data about, or at least leads for ideas about innovation and stories and trends and things like that. A companion publication to Confectionery News is called Food Navigator. And Food Navigator, this is an interesting headline: food giants at risk of greenwashing over regenerative agricultural practices. So again, you can go through here and look at some of these things, and when somebody makes claims about regenerative agriculture, their cocoa is regeneratively grown, you might have some background in order to be able to ask, well, what does that mean? What does regeneratively grown mean? Right. So really, really important thing to know. So Food Navigator, I believe there's a Food Navigator USA. You can subscribe to these. I'm a regular reader of, or a regular recipient of all of these newsletters on a daily basis. There's another, if you're here in the US, I'm going to a, this is not what it is that I thought. What I wanted to do was find, so this is, excuse me, an article in this. So Candy Industry Magazine. So oh, it is. They've changed the name of it. They've changed the look and feel of it. I'm sorry, since the last time I was here. So this is another place. This is a US-based magazine. And again, you can find out things having to do with innovations, flavor trends, what new products are on the market, all that other kind of stuff. So this is a place that I look at on a regular basis in order to figure out what's new, what's interesting, right? And to get an idea about what trends are, and to find out if they're worth reporting on, right? So are there ideas here that might make sense in terms of an article, for example, the work I do at International Confectionery? An unexpected place to go, but interesting at times, occasionally, is The Guardian. The Guardian often has, often enough to make it interesting. I can't get rid of that for some reason. Articles, right, that articles that talk about the difference between somebody who is in the industry, who has some background industry knowledge, and somebody who's writing about a topic who doesn't have much industry knowledge. And this is an example of that. So what we can glean from this is differences in perspective, and how differences in perspective change the way a story is covered, right? And this is why it's really, really, really important. I don't know who Elizabeth Dunn is. I don't know her background. Unfortunately, there's no link here. I don't know who Elizabeth Dunn is. I'm trying to figure out where the byline is on this. And so, you know, it's difficult to follow up on it. But here, we can also find out, so they're mentioning Tony's, the World Cocoa Foundation, Nestle's Cocoa Plan, Mars's Cocoa for Generations, the Cocoa Life Program, Cocoa for Good. I mean, these are really, really good sources of links to other articles often, right? So even though the person who's writing it may not have industry background, what you can get from it is a sense of how much research they did. The more external links, the better, right? But you might also find sources that you didn't know about. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this, because there are some links to sources which are going to provide me background that is going to be useful in other articles that I might write. And they do inform what it is that I do. This is, just like, I was recently interviewed about food trends for the Institute of Food Technologists magazine. And I decided to just go take a look at magazines on food technology and processing. And, some of these now are ones that I go and take a look at to try to get story ideas and to try to get background, right? If I'm trying to do due diligence on stories. I mean, these are places that represent the sources that I go through, which are interesting and I find highly valuable. Now, my job is to do these things. Your job, if you're a chocolate maker, or if you're a confectioner, these aren't necessarily things that these are not necessarily activities that you're going to go through on a daily basis, let alone a regular basis, or regular, let alone a daily basis. But they do suggest resources that you can use if you're reading a story and for some reason the story seems suspect to you. There's something about the story that doesn't make sense. There's an agenda, there's a direction that people are going in, there's background data that you think are missing in what's going on. These represent sources that you can go to take a look and go, okay, I think at least I have a suite of resources that I can use in order to help me navigate the landscape that I'm in. Again, here's one that's just fun, right? I wouldn't expect to, find much about it here. And it could be a story at some point, but Yelp, right? Their top 100 restaurants in 2023. This just, if you go through and scroll through and find out what Yelp thinks of as the top 100 restaurants in the United States, is a very, very fun, it's a very, very funny list to look through. But let's go through and find out what they think about chocolate. And it turns out that in the entire 100 restaurants, chocolate is only mentioned 16 times, right? Which, all right, I'm going to assume that chocolate is going to be mentioned more than once in some of these things, but let's go take a look. I'm not certain how these were ordered, but there's a restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. It's a bakery, and apparently they make great chocolate chip cookies, the best in all of Broward County. That's very, very cool to know. We come down here, and in Mission Viejo, so just north of San Diego, as I recall, there's a bakery that is making some fabulous chocolate almond croissants. So next time you're in Mission Viejo, you can go there. So you can see that they had 3 of the 16 mentions. Burlingame, California, so just north of San Francisco. On the other side, I think, of the bridge, Gigi's Cafe, again, chocolate chip cookies. There's a red velvet cake in there, or red velvet and chocolate chip cookies. Anyway, more cookies. Again, here's another one in Houston, Texas, another bakery. So I can use this if I'm going anywhere to say, oh, here's a well-known or a highly thought of source of an interesting chocolate product, whether it's a cookie or a cake or something like that, and I can go look at it and say, this might be interesting. But what's interesting is that number one is that it's a very, very interesting list of restaurants, and I would really, really interested to know how these became the top 100 restaurants in the United States. Obviously, they're not fine dining restaurants. They're not gourmet in any respect. They seem to be just things that normal people will go to on a regular basis to go do it. But if I'm looking for Mexican in Chicago, I'm going to want to find the best Mexican that there is. And I can look to see if anybody is actually incorporating chocolate into one of their recipes in an interesting way. This is a company, an interesting Italian-French fusion, but they're using chocolate in the cake. They're not actually doing anything interesting with the chocolate in the savory recipe, which is one of the things I was hoping I would find. Here's a coffee shop that serves coffee that has a chocolate note in it. Oxnard, been there, used to live in that part of the country. Vegan chocolate silk, so desserts. Right. Again, I don't want to go through and spend an enormous amount of time on doing this, except to say that Yelp is a crowd-sourced aggregation of information about food. And so it's different from the Edible series. It's different from Serious Eats. It's different from Eater. It's different from anything you'd find on BuzzFeed. Food, for example, it represents just a very different approach to aggregating this information. And so when I look at something like this, what I'm looking to do is, can I find any kind of trend? that might come out of this that could be interesting to report? And is there any place that I should visit when I'm traveling to some place where I'm going? And so, the next time you're out and about and ready to go someplace, some new city, someplace you've never been, going and taking a look at these kinds of lists can help you get a very, very interesting idea about where to go. And it may provide some inspiration. And I think that's, in the end, I think one of the great reasons to keep up with the news. Now, I spend more time than anybody reasonably should. If you're in the workshop, roasting cocoa beans, you're making chocolate, there's not an opportunity to spend an hour a day or more looking through all of these news sources. But I think it makes sense to pick a few of them that you, especially if you can get emails delivered to your inbox which provide summaries of what's going on. For example, like a Google alert. So here's the Google alert. So you have something like this that you can just skim on a regular basis, that it can give you access to a whole range of information. And I think more importantly, a whole range of different perspectives. We as chocolate makers, we as confectioners, need to be good communicators to our customers. We need to be able to tell them stories. We need to be able to tell them information, provide them with information in a way that gives them confidence that we know what it is we're doing, that we know what we're talking about. And, I'm just looking at this, and I didn't see this earlier because I was not paying attention to it. But here's an interesting question from Tasting Table. Is Lindt a bean-to-bar chocolate company? Now, I would not expect Lindt to be a part of this conversation on Tasting Table, but in fact they are. And so I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to go take a look at it. I'm going to find out what Wendy Lee thinks about what bean-to-bar means, how they think Lindt fits into this, because it just provides texture and detail and depth and complexity to the stories that I write. So I want to say to Erica Sanchez, thank you very much. So unfortunately, what I can't do is I cannot copy this text into Google Translate and get it, get the English translation here. So with a university in Colombia and in Spain, they did an investigation into metales pesados, I'm guessing heavy metals. The result in the ground, the leaves, the pods, and the seeds in 2 varieties of cacao in a sector near Sur del Lago, Huila in Colombia. There are many heavy metals, and so por las minas. So this might have been coming from mining in the petroleum sector, mining and in the petroleum sector. Absolutely, if we look at heavy metals contamination, that petroleum exploration and mining are 2 sources we now find. So excuse me for my translation. I would say mi español está mejorando. It is getting better, but it needs a lot of work. También tenemos. We're looking for future results in heavy metals in our products, terminados de chocolate, so the finished chocolate products. And so, Erica, please, right. So what I will do after the fact is what I can do is I can go to LinkedIn where these comments are, and that I will be able to do the translation so that I have a more complete understanding of what you're saying, and then respond on LinkedIn to what it is that you're saying. There's no need to apologize, about the fact that you're not fluent in English. But I appreciate the fact that you did share with everything today. And I'm guessing, Erica, that you are in fact connecting from Colombia. So thank you very much for sharing that with you. And with that, I want to say that we are at an end to today's Chocolate Life Live. It's been fun and exciting for me to be able to talk about this, share a little bit about what it is that I have been doing. What I want to do is a quick note because, doing some research on the Mass Brothers earlier. What I want to do is a quick note is that if you're looking for a cracker, classifier, and winnower, just listed on the Chocolate Life Classifieds last night, there's this 3-piece set from Prefix Equipment. It's in Southern California. So if you're looking for these things, it's a really good price for what you've got here. And it's a very, very high efficiency machine. And you can use, you know what? I realized that I'm not sharing this. So let me go share this. So we're over the chocolate. So Prefix Equipment. This in the center is the classifier. It can be used as a bean cleaner, right? And a scalper. And so you can clean a lot of mess out of your cocoa before you put it in the roaster. And it can also then be used as a classifier after you run it through the cracker so that you can do a very, very highly efficient job of winnowing. So if you're interested, you're looking at upgrading, this is now available on the Chocolate Life. Don't contact me, but there's a link down at the bottom here to contact the seller. So go straight there. Just wanted to let you know about that. And then, hey, Shirley, thanks very much for that. I'm glad you enjoyed it today. And then one last thing before we sign off, and that is to say that if we go and visit the calendar, what you'll notice is that the live stream for this coming Tuesday is we're going to be having a live broadcast of the winners from the 2023 Craft Chocolate Challenge. So the organizer of the challenge, Dustin Cornett, is going to be with me for that. We're going to be going back and forth. We're going to be talking about who the winners are, perhaps share more insight into how the judging happened, which could be very, very interesting for you. And then I know that at least two of the finalists, nobody's been told yet what they've won. We've talked to some people about the fact that they're in the pool of companies that have won one or more awards. But at least two of those two chocolate makers are going to be a part of the presentation. So we're really looking forward to having them on board to participate. And so that's this coming Tuesday on the Chocolate Life Live. And with that, I want to say thanks very much, everybody, for joining me here today. Have a great weekend. And remember, as you're enjoying your chocolate this weekend, that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, I think you're doing it wrong, right? Enjoy, everyone, and ciao. We'll see you soon.